Thank you both very much for joining me this morning. Gina Miller, to you first of all. I mean, business is just one plank of the argument that both camps in this referendum campaign will be building their arguments around. In a nutshell, why do you think remaining in Europe is the solution for the British economy, for British businesses?
Well, the negative effect of being out will hit the pound, as we've seen this week. It will hit our credit rating, which means the government borrowing will be much more expensive. And it will really hit our exports. And when you consider the letter today, actually SMEs account for 60% of the workforce in the UK. And of those who export, 88% export to Europe. So they're going to have to start looking at their agreements, their licenses, their import-export paperwork will go up. This will have a significant effect on their ability to do business in the EU.
Nigel Baxter, what's your response to that? Why do you say that people should vote to leave?
Well, first of all, I think the letter today says something. We were promised a much larger number of FTSE 100 companies coming out. I think 80 was the number suggested. I think now we're only talking about 34. Small and medium enterprises in this country make up the backbone of Great Britain. We are the engine room for Britain. We are the builders, the makers, the growers. And we need now to take back control. We have a great opportunity now to do so. I've been waiting my entire working life to have this opportunity, and I think it's something that we should take.
But can I jump in there?
Gina, yes.
And Nigel, but what happens in the 2-year period? Or actually this whole idea that we'll have a second referendum is nonsense because Article 50 won't give us that. So what happens in the 2 years and when we have to renegotiate 34 agreements, we actually don't know what will happen in that period. We will be in a period of uncertainty which could push back our economy decades.
Your response to that, Nigel?
Well, what I would say to that is, of course, there are things that we have got to sort out in detail, and some of that is quite complicated. There is no doubt about that. I think that one of the things that is being suggested at the time is that there's some risk in this. Business people understand risk. Business people understand calculated risk. Most of the business people in the United Kingdom are putting their own money into their own businesses. They take the risk every day. They negotiate their own agreements. 70% of businesses want the British government to have the authority and the sole right to negotiate our trade agreements, to negotiate and deal with our legislation. And these are the things and these are the opportunities that we have now, and these are the opportunities we must seize.
Are you putting up, though, barriers to that huge market of, what, 500 million people?
I don't believe that we are, because there's a vested interest in the rest of the EU states to trade with the United Kingdom. There's a huge trade imbalance, as we know, some £80 billion more coming to us from the EU than we are sending out there. And they are our friends, they are our allies. We will continue to trade with them. Britain is has been and will remain one of the greatest trading nations on earth. And this is a great opportunity for us to continue to work with the EU, to work with the EU and to forge our own trade agreements with the rest of the world, and that is hugely important. The EU is shrinking and
Nigel,
the rest of the world is
Nigel,
growing.
if I could just bring in Gina Miller.
We do more trade in one area of Germany than we do with all Commonwealth countries put together. So to give up that seems a huge risk. I understand risk, and this is too big.
Do you think that's going to come creaking to a halt, though, or crashing to a halt?
No, it's going to take time.
Because Britain leaves the EU, if that is what happens?
It's going to take time, and this is the issue, is what's going to happen to our economy in that time. For all the Brits, the 2 million plus Brits who work in the EU, they would have to apply for work permits. Every business would have to review their agreements, their supply chain, their trade agreements. And, you know, I believe that Nigel's firm works with Renault or, you know, European suppliers. So all of that would change. All those relationships, all those licenses, all those agreements would have to be negotiated the day after we leave.
Can I just put to you both, we're looking really at big picture stuff today, and we will do that, of course, continue to do that, about various topics, business amongst those. But how are you going to, both of you, translate what you're talking about into a digestible message that the ordinary voter is going to be able to grasp hold of and think, yes, this is how this particular point is going to affect me? Nigel?
Well, first of all, can I just answer Gina on the previous point? I think this is typical of what we're seeing from BSC, the scare story that trade will cease or everything will become far too difficult. There's a vested interest in all of these things to work for British business and to work with our European neighbours, and that is what we will continue to do. In terms of getting the message across, obviously trade is a hugely important part of this debate and will be a huge part of the debate. But there are other issues that we need to focus on and will be focused on in this debate. And things such as sovereignty. We need to take back control. We are not any longer in control of the legislation being imposed on us by Brussels, which is a central-looking, inward-looking political union. It is not a trading union in the sense that that was our idea in 1975. And we should now look beyond the shores of Europe. Of course it's important, of course it will remain important, but we have a great opportunity to forge our own links now across the rest of the world.
Gina, on getting your message across?
This is bigger than just the economy. It's our security, it's a way of life, it will hit every person in their pocket and in their level of security, is our feeling, if we leave Europe. And of course it's not a perfect relationship, but to us, actually nobody knows what the future will hold, but there is more risk with us leaving and not carrying on this relationship than us leaving.
Do you think, Nigel, that what the Prime Minister has negotiated in Brussels recently, do you think that is going to make Brussels look beyond its borders, if I can put it that way? You talked about Brussels being very insular, but do you not believe that in any way the Prime Minister has changed attitudes there?
I don't think that what he has negotiated for Britain is particularly startling. I mean, we weren't surprised that that was the case because he didn't set out for a huge amount in the first place. I think the biggest issue for the EU looking at the British referendum will be that there is a risk of contagion. And there will be a number of countries looking enviously over our shoulder, the public of those countries looking enviously over our shoulder about what next and what the opportunity for them is in what is a doomed, in my opinion, political state.
Gina?
Well, I think that is one of the points that you've brought up, is that us being out, and the whole idea that we'll be Great Britain, is the fact that we won't be Great Britain, because it could be the domino effect of us being out will be the end of Great Britain, and it could in time be the end of the EU. And I think the risk of that in the long term is significant.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.